it's propaganda. And what we're seeing is that we're allowing for this propaganda to not allow the full information out there so that we, the individual, can make that decision. When you're talking about the fact that Dr. Fauci said, well, you got to get over it, this political argument, or you have HHS Secretary Javier Becerra come out and say it is the government's business. That is the biggest turnoff to Americans. It's like, we don't want government in our business. We need to be able to make the best choices that we can make for our families, for the individuals, as opposed to pushing and bullying on this, you have to get the vaccine. The more you push and bully, the less you're going to get people to say, yeah, let me get the vaccine, because that's just not the way we work in America.
Let's jump to this lawsuit. So can you give me a sense, like, who's participating? This isn't just ACU and President Trump and so forth. There's many groups.
There's everyday Americans. There's other groups as well. John Cole, who he was actually a Democrat for a very long time, now a Trump supporter. He is the mastermind. He's brilliant. And he really talked about this for quite some time, of saying, wait a second, this does not make sense. How can the big tech make this decision on whether who can and cannot be on? Now, of course, it's a private company, so it makes it very tricky, but it does present the argument of what First Amendment rights look like for an individual and for these groups. And the double standard that's being placed, where you have a large group of individuals with the same type of philosophy and ideology that are being censored and being treated differently. And so that's, I think, where we're going to see the case, take on. Now, it's interesting because on social media, the narrative has been the case is going to go nowhere. That's already what they're pushing out there. I got to tell you, John Cole, he is one of the best trial lawyers out there. He was part of the tobacco lawsuit years ago. And so he's well renowned for the work that he did. And he wouldn't take on this case if he didn't think we had a chance.
Well, so there is this private company argument, but there's kind of a few arguments that I'm aware of kind of that say, well, that's not quite the case, because one, and this is a report that's extremely bipartisan, that talks about, quite simply, these are monopolies.
That's right.
Many of these companies are, like, in just about every way you could possibly measure, monopoly.
Yes.
Right, which seems to change the equation.
But that's interesting that you brought that up. So on the legislative side, it's why, for example, a lot of these Republicans have come together, and Jim Jordan has been leading the charge, as well as several other of these Republicans in Congress, to basically end Section 230, which is that legal immunity argument, basically where the big tech is saying, you know what? People can't sue us, right? So we're fine. If we censor you, you can't sue us. The goal is, and President Trump talked about it during his administration, and this is continuing through this conversation, is getting rid of Section 230, where these big techs don't have the legal immunity, allowing for these legal lawsuits to go through, and building these antitrust cases as well. Because,
under Section 230, they're supposed to be allowing for content in general. They're not supposed to be acting as publishers, determining what's allowed and what isn't.
That's completely accurate.
But right now, they kind of, I guess you're saying they have the cake and eating it.
They definitely have the cake and eating it, serving as publishers, as editors, deciding what can and cannot go on their platforms, but then obviously suppressing the voices of many conservatives. And I say conservatives, but it's also just everyday Americans that just have an opinion.
So what has happened to the ACU that allows it to join this class action lawsuit? Like, there have to be specific harms, right?
Well, we've seen, for example, that when President Trump spoke here at CPAC in Orlando, it got about 31 million views. And what YouTube did, for example, is you can't find the speech anywhere. And so it's the fact that that's one of the cases, for example, we saw with Twitter, where Matt lost over 46,000 followers, just in a matter of days, without an explanation. So, we've seen these cases time and time again happen at CPAC, and where we were like, we need to be involved in this fight. We want to support those individuals as well that have been censored. And obviously for the president, where we know he has been the one, I think, the biggest victim of it all. He'll never call himself a victim, but he is the biggest victim of it all. And he's the one that has the biggest voice to say, look what they did to me. And it starts with President Trump, but it ends with, Sally from Arkansas. It really starts there, because they want to suppress the conservative thoughts. They don't want to allow for diversity of debate and conversation. And so I think that's why it was so important to get involved. As we've seen, there's been several instances at ACU and CPAC that we felt made it for being part of a strong class action lawsuit.
It just feels like there's a very high bar, because I can imagine, I'm just sort of imagining what the defense lawyers will say is, well, we have all sorts of other reasons for doing what we did, right? It's going to be, it feels like it's something that's just tough to kind of prove in a court law. For many of us, it's really clear there's censorship happening.
Yeah, but it is censorship,
right?
but it's so vague and so wishy-washy how they make these decisions. There's no rhyme or reason to it other than the same type of people time and time again with the same ideology are being censored. So that, I think, in and of itself is a huge problem. It's like if you were to say, okay, well, they're, if it's one thought process versus another, but this is a continual problem that we're seeing only on one side of the individuals who have any conservative thought process or opinions. That's the target for them.
Any final thoughts before we finish up?
I got to tell you, this is a moment in time in our country. We have to stop socialism and communism. That is our goal. It has seeped into our nation. It is destroying our youth, where they themselves are thinking that socialism and communism are the right way to think. And it's our goal to continue to speak up against it, and our goal to explain why we have to stop trying to destroy this country, allow the left to destroy the country, allow the left to dictate the terms. The left more and more hates America, and they want to fundamentally change it. They've said it themselves, and our goal is to say, no, America is a beautiful country. We are the beacon of hope, and we are there to stand for all freedom-loving people, not only in America, but across the globe, and that's what we're going to be focused on, and we will not be canceled.